Welcome. You are about to take a journey to a place of the divine love within with Deborah Beauvais on the Love by Intuition show. For the next hour, allow her to prepare you in becoming a magnet for a profound love-infused relationship by identifying and focusing on solutions through love. Awaken the light within and let your essence shine. And now, here's Deborah Beauvais on Love by Intuition, all part of the Dream Vision 7 radio network.
Welcome, everyone. Bonjour, mes amis. And yes, here I am, Deborah Beauvais, founder, owner of the Dream Vision 7 radio network. We are a Boston-based, full-producing internet radio station with all the bells and whistles. You can listen to us wherever you are in the world. You can ask Alexa. You can also go and do the apps. Whatever you choose to do, we have it all. And I am so excited to let you know that I have one of my favorite guests today. And you can go on our site to hear the older interviews. She hasn't been on in a couple of years, I believe, 2 or 3, but her name is Barbara Berger, and you will probably be familiar with her. She's known and loved around the world for her many books about the amazing power of the mind, including her international bestseller, The Road to Power, Fast Food for the Soul. It's published in more than 30 languages and sold some 1 million copies worldwide. Well, now she has 2 new books. One is Healthy Models for Relationships, the Basic Principles Behind Good Relationships with Your Partner, Family, Parents, Children, Friends, Colleagues, and all the other people in your life. And she also has her own autobiography, My Road to Power, Sex, Trauma, and Higher Consciousness. She's actually in Copenhagen now, but she's American-born, and she flew the States, the USA, to Europe and landed in Copenhagen. So without further ado, we are focusing on, should I say, Healthy Models for Relationships today. And Barbara's going to be back August 22nd. Mark your calendars at 3 p.m. Eastern Time, and we are going to get into sex, trauma, and higher consciousness and her journey from the USA and her family and what transpired over there in beautiful Denmark. Much more higher consciousness floating over there. Without further ado, welcome to the show. I can't wait to talk about that book because I relate to it naturally, and you were soul sisters, and I'm just interested in the details of what happened while you were over there, and just a young girl. Yes. So anyway.
Thank you for the lovely introduction, and I'm happy to be here. I think it's our 15th or 16th show together.
Is it that many?
I believe so. I have my long list here. I'll have to go back and count it, but it says, at my last counting, I think it was 15.
Okay. All right. So those that are listening now or even later, what you can do is go on dreamvision7radio.com. All one word with an S, 7radio.com, and just put Barbara Berger. Her last name is spelled B as in boy, E-R, G as in go, E-R, and then all the other interviews will come up and you can listen to them at your leisure.
The interviews are also available on my website under the interview page. So if you want to, if you would like to do it from my end, I have also so it's on my website is beamteam.com, BEAMTEAM.com, and just click on the interview page and you will find plenty of talks with Deborah there too.
and others as well, which I always find interesting because we're all coming from a different perspective. We're all unique in our own ways of living and interviewing. So yes, that's wonderful. Okay, all right. Well, so it's just good to hear your voice after all these years, it seems. I have to ask you, how many books have you written, and why did you write this one, The Healthy Models for Relationships?
Well, I think I've written now about 20 books. That's sort of the thing I do. But this Healthy Models for Relationships came out of the fact that I work as a coach and a therapist and have clients every single day. And I've been doing this for years. And so over the course of so many years, talking to people, working with people, trying to help them with their different problems, of course I have had this about the power of the mind and the power of focus and all of these other things that I write about in my other books. But I started to realize that nearly everyone who comes to me has some kind of challenge in their personal relationships. And so I started to work with different techniques to help people improve their relationships. And so this book is sort of the result of many, many years. It's based on my, you could say, clinical experience. Everything in this book has been tried and tested. But the main principle of the book, I call it Healthy Models for Relationships, because I discovered from coaching with people that if it was possible for me to formulate what a healthy relationship looks like. In other words, what does a healthy couple relationship look like? What are the characteristics of it? What is a healthy parent-child relationship? What are the characteristics of it? So, or just between friends, so all of these different relationships, I found out that if we could formulate a healthy model, then it made it much easier for people to compare their own situation with the healthy model, and then they could discover where is it in my relationship that it's sort of off. Because I discovered when people come to me, most people, they have discomfort. They know that something doesn't feel right. But most of the people can't formulate specifically where the problem is. For example, is there a lack of healthy boundaries? Is there difficulty in communicating respectfully with each other? I mean, if we can put our finger on what it is that doesn't function, what it is that's out of whack, then we can go to work on improving that area. So that's sort of how this Healthy Models whole thing developed. It's sort of an organic development that grew out of my work with people.
Which really makes sense and surely is needed in this, whether we're speaking of 2023 or in the 1800s, the relationships have gone on. And communication skills, it's really, when you put the two people together, they have different ways that they've been brought up. They might have different cultures. They have a different way of communicating and understanding. And then you put these two people under one roof and expect them to be in the glories forever. But it doesn't usually work that way. So,
well, and the other thing exactly. Well, the other thing I would say, what you're already touching on in your wisdom, Deborah, is that the healthy models that I have formulated are based on our basic democratic principles. In other words, you and I, we're fortunate to live in countries that are democratic societies. And the basis of a democratic society, you could say, it has to do with, as the founders of the U.S. said in the Declaration of Independence, that we hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights. Among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. So this is sort of the basic premise of democracy, that each individual is a divine creation and has certain inherent rights.
Right.
And
I'm so glad that you started the book with the democratic principles, because relationships aren't just our families. Relationships are our colleagues, neighbors. A relationship can be someone that is at the store and they're having a heated discussion with someone else. It just overlaps into every part of our lives. And I just love that you had started the book with that. So that's the foundation. But not everyone realizes that.
Well, that's also the reason why I tried to write a book about it, to make it more clear that if we can formulate democratic principles and understand what they are, and we have them in our society, then my next question is, how well are we doing in our personal relationships? Just as you say, it's not just about government. It's not just about voting. It's also about, are we respecting each individual's rights in our family relationships, especially?
Right. Yes, and you know what? It's interesting, because even within the family, it could be a topic, and both people have a different perspective on that topic, even conveying what they are trying to share with you. And if it's a little bit heated, then instead of and I put myself in that category, you can be living from a higher conscious place, and yet if someone is raising their voice, you may be apt to raise yours instead of lowering your voice. So tell us about the healthy model for. Go ahead.
Okay, I think that again, one of the things that I teach people and that I write about also in this book, it's very, very important to understand in close relationships, family or as a couple relationship, that love and agreement are two different things. That's one of the basic principles that I write about. Many people have the idea, like, if you love me, you'll do what I want. And that's a very, very childish belief. So understanding that love and your opinion about stuff, in other words, love and agreement are two different things. If you're a mature human being and in a mature relationship, you should be able to say, I hear what you're saying, sweetheart, I love you, and I have a different opinion. That's really, really tricky for most of us. So love and agreement are that's sort of one of I do couple therapy too. So sometimes I do people, they come alone, but they also often come with their partner. And so this is the kind of thing that we work on in terms of, if we have two grown-up individuals and they have joint projects together, for example, they live together, they have children together, they have a family together, they have a house together, they have a lot of things that they're both involved in. So how do they communicate respectfully, and how do they achieve what I call the workable compromise? So being sort of more mature is to understand that you can't always get your way, and that if you are trying to make a relationship work, then the workable compromise is often the best solution that we can find, and that's a good thing.
Sure. So the workable compromise, what is that exactly? Are you speaking of the rights and responsibilities in relationships?
No, I'm speaking of the practical solutions. No, the rights and everyone has a right to be who they are and have their opinion about things. So that's just sort of the basics. But when we have different opinions and we're in a situation where we both are involved, then the workable compromise is, like the one person wants to go to Florida for their vacation, the other person wants to go to Europe, and they can have a discussion about it. And then the workable compromise is, maybe it's, okay, well, this year we'll go to Florida, and next year we'll go to Europe. Or, in other words, how do we accommodate each other? Yeah, exactly. And how do we find the place in the middle that we both can agree to? That it's often that we don't get everything that we want.
Right. And that's the way it should be. I mean, no one should really want to have it all their way anyway. Not if you're living from, not if you're living from a place of love and compassion. You're open. Your heart is open to the other person. Yeah.
Yeah, and that you could learn from the other person too. So that's. I mean, again, it's all about, as you say, as we evolve towards more and more love and kindness and compassion, these things become easier. Whereas when we're more involved in, I'm right and I want my way. I mean, so to understand that we're all different, that we have our, as you said before, that we all have the programming, the background, the families that we come from, the cultures that we grow up in. There's a whole slew of things that are the reason that we have the values and opinions that we have.
Right. Right. Well, I would love to get into the healing process, the 8 healing. That's towards the end of the book, and I know we're just starting. But I think it's so important because a lot of people are aware that they're maybe not communicating properly to come to a solution or a resolution, and they may not know why, or they may not know, not why, they may not know how to change it. Do you feel...
I would say that what you're talking about now is addressed. That the book has 3 parts. The first part is the healthy models. The second part is some observations about the nature of reality. And then the third part are the healing processes. But what you're talking about is actually in the first part, where I have several chapters about constructive communication techniques and healthy boundaries and all these things about it. In other words, if we start with healthy boundaries, that's a really good place to start, because there's so much confusion in our relationships about boundaries. And I would say that the easiest way for me to sort of describe what I mean by healthy boundaries is that if you imagine a relationship is like a tennis court, and when you play tennis, there's 2 people, and in the middle, there's a net. And so, in other words, if you and I, Deborah, are playing tennis, you have your side of the net, and I have my side of the net. And where the net is, that's the boundary line between you and me. And when we play tennis, I don't jump over on your side, and you don't jump over on my side. So we stay on our side of the net. And so you could say that in a healthy relationship, the most common boundary violation is giving another person unasked for, unsolicited advice. If I tell you, for example, what you should eat for breakfast, how you should wear your hair, how you should, how your living room should look, and you didn't ask for my advice, you didn't ask for my opinion, then I have jumped over on your side of the net without you inviting me in. And so that's sort of the basis of understanding boundary violations. Something else, if you said to me, Barbara, I'm going to a party tonight and I want to know, should I wear the red dress or the blue dress? Then I can say, oh, Deborah, the red dress was horrible. You have to wear the blue dress because you asked my opinion.
Sure.
But if you didn't ask for my advice, then if we have a healthy relationship, I keep my mouth shut.
Right, which is not the norm in the way that most of us communicate. Usually we're offering advice left and right, our opinion, and they never asked us for it. So,
that is the number one problem. If you take, for example, a place where I see it really a lot, I often have grown-up women and their mothers.
Oh, yes.
And so, in other words, you have the mother, then you have the adult daughter who has some small kids. And the problem is also often the relationship between the adult daughter and her mother, because her mother is all the time coming with unasked for advice to the daughter. So that's a perfect example of what we're talking about, that the older mother, the grandmother in this case, she hasn't learned to back off and respect her adult daughter and that it's her adult daughter's job to bring up her children the way she sees as best. So there are these kind of boundary violations that are happening all the time, and I can see that when people come to me and they want to learn about this, and in other words, when I point out the healthy model, stay on your side of the net, don't come with unsolicited advice, it's sort of when people are willing to look at their behavior and consider the behavior, the relationships, they get so much better. It's amazing how much it helps.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Well, we need to take our first break. The time is flying by, as we always know. Everyone stay with us. We'll be back more with Barbara Berger from Copenhagen, Denmark.
Experience a different yet profound healing with Reconnective Healing. Includes yet expands beyond any and all known forms of energy healing. The Reconnective Healing spectrum is comprised of the full healing and evolutionary continuum of energy, light, and information. It allows for healings that are not just physical, not just mental, not just emotional, yet go beyond that to bring healing that includes the evolution of your very being and essence. Deborah Beauvais, trained and certified by world-renowned Dr. Eric Pearl, offers appointment hours at Seacock Family Chiropractic in Seacock, Massachusetts. For questions or to set up both distance or local sessions, call Deborah at 508-431-1959. Again, 508-431-1959. Or go to lovebyintuition.com. That's lovebyintuition.com.
Calling all authors. Have you been considering an audiobook? Well, look no further. Come take advantage of Dream Vision 7 Radio Network's unique in-house audiobook production, which includes benefits and bonuses from our radio station. Let our knowledgeable staff guide you to create the audiobook you've always dreamed of without breaking the bank. Check out our full one-stop service from A to Z, including the ACX process. Schedule a free consultation by calling 508-226-1723. That's 508-226-1723. Or go to DreamVision7Radio.com.
After narrowly surviving the attack on Sandy Hook Elementary, first-grade teacher Caitlin Roy DeBellis was left searching for answers that would never come. Eventually, she chose to focus on questions that could be answered. How do I make sure this tragedy doesn't define us? How do we get our control back? Those two questions led her to found the 501c3 nonprofit organization Classes for Classes. When gifts poured into their classroom, she decided they would help someone else by paying it forward and being kind. This developed into a social network which allows K-8 classrooms to connect so that every student in the United States can learn these crucial lessons. Classes for Classes' mission is to build students' social-emotional intelligence by connecting them to care. All C4C projects are crowd-funded. Any teacher in the U.S. can visit classesforclasses.org. That's classes, the number 4, classes.org. Sign up today.
Delight your kids with an enchanting journey by reading the Paper Doll Kids children's book by Deborah Beauvais and Janine Sullivan. There's even a catchy tune, Kids for Love Song, produced by Bob Sherwood and sung by kids just like yours. The story weaves around 7 paper dolls flying around the world doing good deeds as they bring important attention to our endangered animal friends. There's even a magical ring with a universal message. Kids become interested in service projects, action through compassion, and planting seeds that nurture positive change. The Paper Doll Kids and Kids for Love Song are a production of the Kids for Love Project. Get the book now on Amazon Kindle and the song on CD Baby or iTunes.
This is Dream Vision 7 Radio Network, uniting mankind with universal love. Our shows are created from the heart, bringing each listener to a place of divine enlightenment. Breathe, relax, and enjoy. Let life flow.
And we are back. This is a live show. Anyone that would like to call in, Bob is in the house and can answer and put you through directly. And the number to call, toll free, is 833-220-1200, 833-220-1200. And we welcome callers. Barbara welcomes your calls, your questions, and all of that, and I do as well. We're talking with Barbara Berger. She is American-born. She now lives in Copenhagen, Denmark. She has written a number of books, 20, I think is the last count. We're focusing on her newest book, Healthy Models for Relationships. She has been a coach and a therapist for years and years, helping people around the globe come into alignment with their own true power. You can get in touch with her by going on her site. It's Beam Team, and Beam is just spelled just like team, BEAMTEAM, BeamTeam.com. So, getting back to our conversation, Barbara, what is one of the other, we know now that number one is offering advice when not asked, but what is another big one that we need to learn and be mindful of?
Well, in terms of boundary violations, it's blaming other people for the way you feel, the way what's going. I mean, in other words, it's really, really important to understand that you are responsible for you. And another person telling you that you, again, it's one thing if you're out of line and we're talking about some specific event, but when another person tells you how you should think, feel, anything about the way you are living, when you haven't asked for their advice, it's really, really difficult situations to be in. And this happens often in relationships and families.
Right. So it's being mindful and biting your tongue and just listening, which is something that we all need to practice. And sometimes we're better at other times, depending on what our experiences are for the day or what's happening in our lives for the week or the family, other people in the family, or when we're going out. You know, sometimes we're all, we're all warm and friendly to someone we don't even know, and we may be the opposite to people that we care so much for.
Yes, it's very challenging. One of the things that I do. Yes, definitely. It's about the energy that we have. Absolutely. I mean, that's what it all comes down to. We know when there's good energy and when there isn't. And I mean, people who are very angry, that kind of energy, we want to avoid it as much as possible. That's healthy self-care. But so if we would go back to, so how do we deal with situations where there's criticism, there's boundary violations? I teach what I call assertiveness training. So in other words, how do we, in concrete situations, and there's a lot of examples in this book about situations, how you can constructively deal with them, and I even have different techniques that you can use in trying to set a boundary and be assertive. And I think that the most basic one that I could share on this program now is it's called the sandwich technique. And this is a way of talking that we haven't learned and that we have to practice and that we can learn. So when someone comes at you with a request or tells you, how to dress or what to eat or so on and so forth, how do you deal with that? So in other words, if someone comes at you with something and they say something, instead of just going on the defensive and getting into an argument, the sandwich technique is a way of dealing with it. And it's about replying to whatever the person says to you with sentences that are made up of two bits. There's two different parts of your sentence. The first part of your sentence is that you acknowledge that you heard the other person. In other words, you can say to the person, I hear what you're saying. In other words, you're not saying that you agree with the person. You're not saying anything about what you're thinking about, but you acknowledge that you hear the person. Everybody wants to be heard and wants to be treated with respect. So you can say, I hear what you're saying. So that's part one of the sentence. Then we get the bridge, and instead of saying but, you say and then you come with your message or your reply. I'm really not interested in that, or I have a different opinion, or thank you and no. So in other words, learning this kind of technique is a way of dealing with situations instead of getting angry, defensive, or getting into a fight with someone. Does that make sense to you?
Absolutely.
And so, for example, if someone is criticizing you and you start off by saying, I hear what you're saying, you can also, the second part of the sentence, and you can say, I don't understand what you mean. Could you be a little bit more specific? So that's another way of dealing with criticism or things that are difficult, to ask for more information. I can hear that you're upset, and could you please tell me why this bothers you so much? In other words, when you ask for more information, first of all, you're again showing the person respect. You would like to understand them more. You would like to hear what's bothering them more. And then you're giving them time to tell you a bit more, but also you're focusing the attention away from yourself. Instead of going on the defensive, you're sort of turning the energy back to the other person, and they actually have to go into themselves if they're going to answer the question, what is it about this? Why are they so upset? So there are many ways that we can deal with criticism or discussions or whatever you want to call it in a more healthy way, and that we often have a better outcome when we do this.
Yes.
The other thing that I also teach couples especially is what I call, there's a very simple tool which I call the timeout principle. That if you're having a discussion with your partner and it starts to get out of hand, there is a point in every discussion where it's no longer constructive, where it becomes destructive. And I often have couples agree. I say this is something you have to agree upon in advance before you're having a fight or before you're getting into a heated discussion, that if one of the two people calls for a timeout, you both immediately respect the timeout, and that you go your separate ways for at least 15 minutes. In other words, the one goes into the bedroom, the other one goes out in the kitchen, or the one goes for a walk. So in other words, instead of continuing the discussion where it's no longer appropriate, where we've got such bad energy going on now, that you take a break.
And then you have to be cognizant of each person and the way that they like to communicate and share, because if you may have a person that needs to just let it sit for a day, and they may be partnered with someone that needs to address it that day and move on and let it just move through nicely and gently. And that can be, that I think is another hard one when you have two different.
Yes, that's a really good point. And I often say the person who needs more time, they have to be assertive enough to say, I hear what you're saying, sweetheart, and I really need to think about this. Can we talk about it again tomorrow? I mean, that is also a fair request to make. In other words, let me sleep on it. Let me consider it. I hear what you're saying. I have to, again, we have to allow people some people process things very quickly, and some people need time. And that's fair.
Right. And I think as we age, we might need to, take a little more time to process it. I've noticed that. And then when I say, I need to process and ponder for a little bit, then you can get the clarity, you can see everything objectively, and then move forward with whatever you're speaking of.
Well, again, if we go back to basic principles, it's really important to understand that each one of us, as you were saying to begin with, each one of us is programmed from childhood with the belief systems of our family and our, our religion, the country we live in, and all. So each person has what I call it. You have your personal programming from your family, but then you also have the collective programming from the type of society you grow up in. In other words, if you're a woman and you're born in Saudi Arabia, your idea of women's rights is not the same as ours is here in the West. So we have the collective programming and the personal programming. And this is really important to understand, that this programming in most of us is completely unconscious. We have belief systems that are running on automatic in ourselves. And so when we have difficulties in our relationships, it's often the clash between different programming. And as you were just saying so wisely before, to have time to actually consider another point of view and to have the courage, or you could say the wisdom, to be brave enough to go in and question your own program. Is my belief system in terms of this, is it appropriate? Is it sane? Is it positive? Is it loving and kind? All these questions that we can ask ourselves.
Right. I think the questions are so powerful, and it's really getting to know the truth of who we are when we ask those kinds of questions. What do I believe? Why do I believe this? Why am I feeling this way? Where, all the different pieces that come with being involved as a human on the earth. There's things that crop up. You question, is that my belief or is it someone else's? Am I feeling the collective consciousness or is this mine? There's so many pieces to it, but I think with what you're saying is, if you can take the time and get out of it, because the ego will come in and want to turn it around and such, and it's being aware that, okay, let's just sit back for a minute and see what exactly is going on. What are my thoughts? Why am I thinking this way? Why am I feeling this way?
So it's definitely complicated. And again, if we go back to, in the middle section of the book here, I have these observations about the nature of reality. And there I point out, which is so important in dealing with all of this stuff, is that to understand that we can't get inside of another person's head and control their thinking and feeling. Each one of us is in our own subjective bubble, you could say. And the more... and the more we understand that, we come back to having a realistic understanding of what is it that I can do something about and what is it that I can't do anything about. And number one that I can't do anything about is we cannot change the way other people think and feel. That's hopeless. We've all tried and it doesn't work.
Right.
But what we can do something about is ourselves. In other words, we can ask ourselves all these questions. Am I the highest and best version of myself in this situation today? Am I treating my fellow human beings with loving kindness? Am I respectful? I mean, all of these things that we can ask ourselves, they are something we can do something about.
Right.
And that's actually
a choice.
Yeah, and that's also where our personal power resides, in our own ability to be the highest and best version of who we are.
Right.
So you can say, we come back to the famous serenity prayer, which is, God, give me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. That's actually what we're talking about right now. We're talking about the wisdom to know what we can do something about and what we can't do anything about.
Right. And we can always, I think, as long as we're on the planet, we can always be better. We can always do better. And it's really a choice of recognizing the different things within ourselves that we can change and we want to change, so that we can be part of that, the better world, the better consciousness, all of that. We need to hold that thought. Because we need to take our last break. Yes. Everyone, don't go away. Stay with us. We're with Barbara Berger. Hold that thought.
Take a journey to a place of the divine love within with Deborah Beauvais on the Love by Intuition Show, Monday through Friday at 6 p.m. and 6 a.m. Eastern. Our message is love in the purest form. The light within us all is a guide to recall our beginning, to learn to love self and humankind, and to feel the higher power of our own divinity. To attract love, one needs to be loved. Come join us and step into this glorious vibration called love.
Delight your kids with an enchanting journey by reading the Paper Doll Kids Children's Book by Deborah Beauvais and Janine Sullivan. There's even a catchy tune, Kids for Love Song, produced by Bob Sherwood and sung by kids just like yours. The story weaves around 7 paper dolls flying around the world doing good deeds as they bring important attention to our endangered animal friends. There's even a magical ring with a universal message. Kids become interested in service projects, action through compassion, and planting seeds that nurture positive change. The Paper Doll Kids and Kids for Love Song are a production of the Kids for Love Project. Get the book now on Amazon Kindle and the song on CD Baby or iTunes.
Are miracles real? Can you move from mayhem to miracles? 30 prominent authors say yes as they share their high fives and down lows of challenges, abuse, addiction, and love. Experience hope, the magic elixir of miracles, through the personal stories of New York Times best-selling authors James Redfield, Dr. Bernie Siegel, Sister Jenna, Reverend Temple Hayes, and many more. If you like bestsellers, chaos to clarity, and crappy to happy, you'll love crying and laughing through mayhem to miracles. Sacred Stories of Transformational Hope, available now on Amazon and in bookstores worldwide.
It's a child's job to play, to learn, and to have fun. It's an adult's job to keep them safe. Did you know that 1 in 4 girls and 1 in 6 boys will be sexually abused before the age of 18? Every day, families enter the Children's Advocacy Center because a child's courage to tell someone what happened to them. Keeping our children safe starts with a conversation. This is Michelle Aranger, Executive Director of the Children's Advocacy Center. Learn more on how to keep your child safe. Visit cacofbc.org. This message made possible by the Fall River Rotary Club.
This is Dream Vision 7 Radio Network, uniting mankind with universal love. Our shows are created from the heart, bringing each listener to a place of divine enlightenment. Breathe, relax, and enjoy. Let life flow.
There's still time to call in. Our number is 833-220-1200, but you're going to have to hurry. Bob is in the house, and he can put you right through to Barbara or I or both of us, so don't be shy. All right, Barbara, before the break, we were talking about how, well, it just went out of my head, but you wanted to respond. So is the thought still in your head?
Yes, it was that life, the journey of the soul here is an evolutionary process, and that we're all on a learning curve. That I actually have a chapter in the book about this, and it's so important to frame our experience in the sense that each soul is. We start at a certain place in our sort of consciousness evolutionary journey, and that wherever we are, we're learning and we're trying stuff out, and no one is perfect. It's a much more loving and kind way of being in the world, to understand that. So we don't have to beat up on ourselves so much, and we don't have to beat up on our family and friends so much. So to understand that this journey is what this life experience is about.
Yes, and we spend so much energy on beating ourselves up, but when you get right down to the nitty gritty, it's really knowing who you are and what makes you tick, and then noticing the things that maybe the different experiences that maybe you're not handling it as well as you could. You can always do better. You can always do better, but not beat yourself up about it.
Exactly. But again, to take responsibility for not being perfect, I mean, I would say that this whole being such a there's so many people who come to me that their basic problem is that they're overly responsible and they're perfectionists. And these kind of very sort of black and white thinking, either I'm I'm an angel and I'm perfect, or I'm a total fiasco in life. I mean, it's really very, very immature thinking. People who are more psychologically mature, they know that, things can be tough and that we're all on a learning curve, and I'm not perfect and you're not perfect. And if we're sort of a little bit more loving and kind, both to ourselves and to our fellow human beings, things will probably work out a lot better. I mean, when I say it, it sounds so obvious, but if you actually listen to people talk, which I do every day, it's just, it's like it's shining out of people that they're just so hard on themselves. And they have such unrealistic expectations to the human condition.
Right. And that is one of the key points. They have just it's not reasonable expectations, and that can sour a relationship really quick.
It certainly can.
Yeah,
it certainly can.
Now, I wanted to get into. Oh.
One of the things that I sort of teach people who come to me is I call it sane self-talk. We're all having this inner dialogue, and when sane self-talk is when I sort of help people moderate the beating themselves up, or the critical inner parent voice, or whatever you want to call that voice, which is driving people crazy. People who are stressed, people who are overwhelmed, they all have this beating themselves up voice inside them. And in fact, you were mentioned this about the healing processes in the back of the book. One of the healing processes in this book is I use the model I call the wounded inner child and the functional adult, that we really have two sides of us. And the functional adult is the grown-up voice, which is the same self-talk. In other words, the grown-up wise part of yourself has to learn to take care of the wounded inner child part of yourself, and to comfort yourself, and to take care of yourself and give yourself the love, the kindness, the compassion that maybe you didn't get from your own family of origin or whatever the background is. So to learn to meet yourself with understanding is really the greatest gift of all that we can give ourselves.
That is good, to meet ourselves with understanding. I like that, Barbara.
Yeah, just to think if we could do that. And that's also what happens for people who go to therapy or who work on these inner processes, that they can learn to meet themselves with more kindness and understanding. I mean, it's like, wow. I mean, it's so liberating, this.
Right. And it's okay. There's nothing wrong. It's like you said earlier.
Yes, it's definitely okay.
Right or wrong. It just
not in
is.
That sense. Exactly, but also that, again, if you combine it with the understanding that the soul is evolving, and that the things that happen to us we have, each one of us, our own unique learning process, you can say. You wanted to talk about, we're going to do it on the next show, about my background, sex trauma and higher consciousness. The things that the dysfunctionality of my family of origin, the things that happened to me with the Vietnam War and all those things. So that story, you could say, how my karma became my dharma. But that's true of everyone, that we have our karma, the things that we are born into, the things that I know a bit about your background, too. You've had some really troubling times also. We have talked about this before, you and I. But with you and I, we try to, it's like, what is the gift in this, and how can we use these previous experiences to be of service to our fellow human beings? I must say that's my whole thing. I mean, how can I help ease human suffering with the things that I have learned from the sex trauma experiences that I've had? So
exactly. And that feeds the soul. And it's all these different pieces to life that each of us need to thrive. We need to be heard. We need to follow our dream of what makes our heart sing. We need to listen to others. All those pieces of the pie are so important. And it's learning all of them as they come and then retaining them when you're in the real life situation, which is very powerful when you can hear something and instead of react, you can actually feel it and come back with something that, is softer, or like you were saying earlier, then the person has to be more, more detailed. And then and when they do, they're understanding what they're conveying in a better situation, a better way of communicating. So one's teaching the other.
It's so important what you're saying. I mean, in other words, I always say that we human beings, we're interrelational beings, that the way we relate to each other is by talking to each other. I mean, that's just the way it is. And so, especially in dysfunctional families, that's one of the sort of the characteristics of a dysfunctional family is that they don't talk. I mean, they don't know how to talk. Talking is dangerous. And when you can't talk, it's like you're really denied your humanity. Because that's the way we relate to each other. And so to understand that we can talk in a respectful way and to understand that we can discuss things and it's not, life or death or love and agreement are the same. So that's the thing about being a mature human being, to understand that talking is one of the main ways that we figure out the world and ourselves.
Yes.
And so when we're not allowed to talk, I mean, I had that kind of a background. I mean, when you're not allowed to talk, when you're not allowed to, it's like, who are you? You're not allowed to have your opinion.
Right. And many people grow up that way and then expect to be the opposite or proficient with communication when they decide to settle down and have a family and have a partner. There's a lot of complexities in living here and experiencing this. Well, we only have a couple more minutes. I'm going to give it to you. Well, one of the things, I'll wait until August 22nd to ask you my question. So for this time, we will put it over to you. What do you want to leave the listeners with? What do you want to share in these last couple minutes?
I think that people they ask me sometimes, what is the one thing that I would recommend that's the most important if we want to have healthy relationships. And I would say that the number one principle, which is more important than anything else, is one word: respect. Respect for our fellow human beings, respect for ourselves, respect for each individual's right to be who they are, which is the basis of democracy. In couple relationships, I have a list of things that we can look at, but the last thing on the list is respect. Do we treat each other with respect, especially when we disagree? So I would say that is the number one thing, that respect is the thing that makes it work. Without that, nothing really works.
Right, I would agree with that because of what we started at the beginning with the democratic principles. Everyone should be free to live the way they choose, love who they would like, marry who they would like if they want to get married. All of that should be free to do that with no one dictating or no one preventing that to happen, regardless of who you are in this world. Yeah.
And that is the challenge of democracy, exactly that. So in other words, if I want to stand on my head all day long, it's my right to do that, as long as I don't interfere with your right to stand on your head all day long, if that's what you want. So how do we navigate in a multicultural, multifaceted world where people are so different and so on. And so as far as I can see, it's the only thing that can do it for us is respect.
Yes, that's the first and foremost. Mm-hmm. And like you said, respect for ourselves. And that's maybe where we start, is respect. Not maybe, that's where we start. Respecting ourselves, loving ourselves, which will build compassion, but always remember that respect. Because you never know, even the person on the other phone, that maybe there's an issue and you're trying to smooth it out. Maybe it's something to do with a bill or a company, whatever it may be. You don't know what that person is going through in their life. And so when you think of it in that respect, then you can handle yourself with respect.
But also that we come back to that always asking for more information usually helps. In other words, instead of jumping to conclusions, instead of assuming that you know, I mean, I always say it's really important to remember that no one is a mind reader, that we have to ask for more information and not assume that we know what the person is thinking, what they're feeling, what they're trying to say. Ask them. I don't understand.
Right.
Can you clarify? So
yes. Perfect. Well, I want to thank you so much for coming on the show, and everyone.
Thank you too for having me once again, Deborah. It's always a pleasure.
Of course. Yes, it's always fun, and we giggle. Everyone listen to this show. Tune in August 22nd. It will be live at 3 p.m. So remember, it's not 6 p.m. that day. It will be 3 p.m. Eastern Time, and we will be talking about My Road to Power, which is Barbara's autobiography. All right, we need to run. Everyone, listen to the show, share the show until we come together in love and dignity and respect.
Respect.
Are you seeking a clearer path to love? Then tune in to the Love by Intuition show next week. All designed to your highest good. To contact Deborah Beauvais, owner of Empowered Connections, call her at 508-226-1723. That's 508-226-1723. Or link on to lovebyintuition.com. Remember, we are all one, and we are all part of the miracle of love.
This is Dream Vision 7 Radio Network, uniting mankind with universal love. Our shows are created from the heart, bringing each listener to a place of divine enlightenment. Breathe, relax, and enjoy. Let life flow.